Hey guys, it's me, Chela Walks. I'm reading chapter 2 today of Facing Love Addiction by Mellody. I hope chapter 1 went alright for you guys. If you have any comments or questions, just pop them below. I usually respond within about 24 hours. So, no copyright infringement intended. Important note, we are starting chapter 2 today, and it is called The Characteristics of the Love Addict. 3 characteristics sum up the major behavioral symptoms of a love addict. Number 1, love addicts assign a disproportionate amount of time, attention, and value above themselves to the person to whom they are addicted, and this focus often has an obsessive quality about it. Love addicts have unrealistic expectations. Number 2, love addicts have unrealistic expectations for unconditional positive regard from the other person in the relationship. And number 3, love addicts neglect to care for or value themselves while they're in the relationship. Although I see love addiction most often in female partners of sexual romantic relationships, it is also possible for males to be love addicts. A person can also relate as a love addict in other kinds of relationships, such as with a parent, one's children, a mother-in-law, a counsellor, a close friend, a religious leader, a 12-step sponsor, a guru, or a movie star. 2 fears, one conscious, the other unconscious. In addition to these three characteristics, love addicts are often in the groups of 2 principal fears. The most conscious fear is the fear of being left. Love addicts will tolerate almost anything to avoid being left, the fear of which comes from the sorts of childhood experiences described later in this chapter. The irony is that while love addicts want to avoid being left and be connected to someone in a secure way, the close, demanding connection they try to establish is actually enmeshment rather than healthy intimacy, which they also fear, at least unconsciously. This denied fear also comes from the childhood experience of either physical or emotional abandonment, or both. Love addicts did not experience enough intimacy from their abandoning caregivers to know how to be intimate in a healthy way. So, in adulthood, while love addicts often think they are intimate and are seeking an intimate relationship, they are in fact frightened by offers of healthy intimacy because they don't know what to do. When they reach a certain level of closeness, they often panic and do something to create distance between themselves and their partners again. These 2 fears of abandonment and intimacy bring up the agonizing and self-defeating dilemma of the love addict. Love addicts consciously want intimacy but can't tolerate healthy closeness, so they must unconsciously choose a partner who cannot be intimate in a healthy way. The power of addiction, assigning too much time and value. When, as recovering codependents, we come out of denial about being addicted to a substance or a compulsive behavior, we often realize that our addiction has acquired a control over us that is greater than our own willpower. Whatever we're addicted to initially made us feel better, but eventually begins to make us feel worse. Perhaps the pain of harmful consequences or a confrontation by someone forces us to take a look at what we're doing. We may decide we want to stop using the substance or doing the compulsive behavior, only to find that we cannot. At that point, we may painfully realize that we are in the grip of something bigger than we can control, something that has surprisingly strong power over us. In this sense, we can say we have, in effect, made this addictive process a higher power. Recovery can begin when we finally are able to say we are powerless over the addictive process and over ourselves in regard to it, and that our lives have become unmanageable. Recognizing and admitting this is the significance of the first step in any 12-step program. This process of evaluating an addiction can be applied to love addiction. Possibly the most significant characteristic of love addiction is that we assign too much time and value to another person. Love addicts focus almost completely on the person to whom they are addicted. They obsessively think about, want to be with, touch, talk to, and listen to their partners, and want to be cared for and treasured by them. At the beginning, this relationship makes love addicts feel good. They admire their partners for, among other things, their evident competence at getting things done, and they rate this person as superior to themselves or as having more power. Along with the perception that the other party has more power comes the tendency to assign them even more power than they really have, and to expect them, therefore, to rescue love addicts from the vicissitudes of life, protect them from the pain or destruction, take care of and nurture them. When love addicts view the other party as having such omnipotent power, they make that person, the higher power. Just as the higher power for the alcoholic is the bottle, for the drug addict the drug, for the work addict the work experience. Eventually, as love addicts try harder and harder to manipulate the other person to live up to the mental image they have created, that is, someone who will care for and love them the way they long to be cared for and loved, they experience repeated disappointments because no one can satisfy these insatiable desires. The relationship then begins to make them feel worse. When the pain gets bad enough, love addicts may even decide to end the relationship, only to find that they can neither live with or without their partners. Not only do love addicts have inaccurate beliefs about who their partner is, they feel angry because their repeated disappointment in the partner for not behaving according to their expectation, which is of a higher power. Love addicts begin to retaliate with toxic fighting against what they interpret as a willful failure to love on the part of the other party. While many assume that a codependent is someone who is dependent on, enmeshed with, and takes too much care of someone else, this condition is actually more properly called love addiction. Not all codependents make other people their higher power. Some wall themselves off from people, others offend and control without trying to be intimate. Making another person our higher power is, I believe, the heart of love addiction, an addictive process of its own. In order to enter recovery from either codependence or love addiction and stay there, we need to develop a relationship with an appropriate higher power. A power greater than ourselves that is not another human being, a power that can provide guidance, solace, and serenity. In the framework of a 12-step program, spiritual development connects us to something that truly has more power than we do, so that we get help when we need to offset our own imperfection, fallibility, and lack of power to change. We also get help with the internal struggles of all people have with respect to the ordinary difficulties of living. Unrealistic expectations for unconditional positive regard. Love. Another powerful characteristic of love addiction is that love addicts expect their partners to give them unconditional positive regard at all times, a reflection of the love addict's profound lack of self-esteem. Love addicts usually have serious doubts about their self-worth, and so they are driven more than others to hope for and seek experience of unconditional positive regard to heal their wounded self-esteem, like alcoholics who seek relief in a bottle, or work addicts who seek it either in the process of staying busy or in achievement. Love addicts seek in a relationship enough unconditional positive regard to relieve the pain of extremely low self-esteem, a link to codependence. The tragedy is that the love addicts are usually drawn to love avoidance, who try to avoid commitment and healthy intimacy and are powerfully focused on addictions such as alcoholism, work, or sex. Love addicts often wind up taking care of love avoidance when love avoidance lives become unmanageable. But the need to do so makes them angry. Since they cannot tolerate the thought of being alone, they stay in the relationship and take care of things. But their anger usually makes them become very controlling and abusive. They can't leave because they fear abandonment, and they can't be comfortable staying because their desire to be rescued, cared for, and protected isn't being satisfied. Neglecting to care for and value themselves. When love addicts get into co-addicted relationships, they cut back on doing the work of valuing and taking care of themselves. I find that most love addicts don't know how to take care of and value themselves very well in any case, since they think their care is someone else's job. So when they start a relationship with someone, they expect this person to value and care for them, and they decrease whatever they were doing for themselves before they started the relationship. I've heard many female love addicts say, "When I'm not in a relationship, I do a pretty good job of taking care of myself. I balance my checkbook, get my car fixed, eat balanced meals, handle most of my problems. I can even make most decisions fairly well and feel good about my opinions most of the time. But when I get into a relationship, I really deteriorate." Not only is it irrational to expect unconditional positive regard from another person, it seems preposterous to expect a person who is trying to avoid intimacy to take care of us. Love addicts whose skewed thinking tells them that their partners can give them unconditional positive regard, take care of them, are experiencing a failure in their relationship with themselves. A link to Codependents. Childhood experiences of the love addict. I have come to believe that people fall into love addiction because of the unhealed pain from childhood abandonment and the feeling that they cannot be safe in the world without having somebody else to hold them up. They cling to a delusional belief that the other party has the power to take care of them, affirm them, and somehow make them complete. They keep trying to get the love avoidant to match their unrealistic mental image, and this insistence creates a great deal of toxicity between the two of them. Love addicts usually didn't have enough appropriate bonding with their caregivers and probably experienced moderate to serious abandonment or neglect in childhood. Young children feel loved to the extent that somebody takes care of them. Caring transmits the message, "You're important, you matter, you are loved." I believe that when children do not get enough connection and nurture from a parent, they experience serious difficulty with self-esteem. Love addicts usually experience much deep pain and sadness and acute sense of loss during childhood because a part of themselves was denied the opportunity to grow properly when their caregivers failed to take care of them. This pain and sadness I call the pain of the precious child. It goes very deep and back far beyond the earliest conscious memories. As children, love addicts experience enormous fear because they are helpless to create connection with their caregivers. In counselling, they often describe that child fear as a sense of having a loss of their own breath, as if their air supply had been cut off and they were literally dying. They also describe being empty because they weren't filled with nurture by their caregivers, and because they weren't nurtured for who they were, they had trouble being or liking their natural selves. In addition, many were angry because their needs went unmet, since there are fleeting moments when such children are conscious of the abuse they are experiencing. This severe degree of separation in childhood, the original neglect or abandonment experience, has an extremely toxic effect on children that extends into adulthood. The original abandonment experience is particularly filled with pain, fear, anger, shame, and emptiness. Because the children have no place to express these emotions, they store them up inside and fire them off years later when the threat or actual experience of being left in adulthood stimulates the accumulated emotions. Many of these children have had a limited or brief connection with someone, such as a grandparent, which brought relief from the pain, fear, anger, and emptiness of the abandonment. This may only intensify the problem, however, because it teaches them that it is the process of getting connected with someone that brings relief from the anguish. Even as children, love addicts long to be connected, to belong to someone, to finally feel safe by bonding with people who they think will fill their gaping emptiness and banish their feelings of inadequacy. They seek the person who will relieve the stress of the original abandonment experience. As adults, almost any other person will do: a lover, a parent, a friend, their own children, a counselor, a minister. If the other party isn't powerful, it doesn't matter. The love addict will invest this person with enough imaginary power and unconditional love to make the love addict whole and deliriously happy. The fantasy of a rescuer is born. One way such children may escape the pain of severe abandonment by the parents is to fantasize about being rescued by a hero of some kind. Little girls may imagine a knight in shining armor who has loving feelings for her and who does things that demonstrate this love by connecting with her, finally giving her life meaning and vitality. The fantasy is often very much like the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, in which Sleeping Beauty lies asleep, out of touch with herself and her surroundings, until the life-giving kiss of Prince Charming awakens her. Children spend so much time in this fantasy world because it creates a state of euphoria. I spent hours as a child daydreaming about my knight in shining armor. If I felt bad, I could play this fantasy out in my mind, get high in about 10 minutes, and stay there for at least 2 to 3 hours. I think that when we put a pleasurable picture in our minds and think about it, we can stimulate an emotional response to it that may lead to the release of endorphins into our system. Endorphins literally relieve emotional pain and create varying degrees of euphoria. Such children come to believe that by connecting with such a hero, they, like Sleeping Beauty, will come alive and be safe and valuable at last. For male love addicts, the rescuer is often the same version of a super nurturing female. For gay men and lesbians, it is another same-sex person. This fantasy becomes more and more ingrained in the subconscious mind as the person grows older. As adults, these people continue the search for someone to fulfill their rescuer fantasy. This concept is reinforced in romance novels, movies, and love songs today, and many men and women are strongly influenced by it. Some people may even reason, it must be possible to connect this way to such a hero, or else why would there be so many movies, books, and songs about it? The problem with this line of thought is that the relationships depicted there actually reflect unhealthy relationships based on intensity, delusion, and unrealistic expectations, and not mature, healthy love. A built-in sense of helplessness or neglect. When the parent abandons or neglects the child receives the message that, I won't care for you because you are worthless. Abandoned children can't get nurture and affirmation from outside because their caregiver deserts them, and they can't nurture and affirm themselves because they are too immature and no one has taught them what healthy nurture is. So almost all love addicts enter adult relationships with a built-in sense of defectiveness and worthlessness, and the belief that they are helpless to care for themselves, which comes directly out of the original abandonment by the parent. Accompanying this is usually a fantasy delusion that a white knight of some sort will rescue the love addict and fulfill the exaggerated longing created by the abandonment. American culture compounds the problem by promoting this concept, especially by supporting women to believe it. Also, another effect of the neglect or abandonment on love addicts is the belief that in a relationship, if they do not get close enough, they will die. This promotes the love addict's boundaryless behavior in the co-addictive relationship, which feels like suffocation to the love avoidance. Distinction between love addiction and codependence. Our notions about how to live life come from our connection with caregivers. Abandonment experiences leave children with the message of worthlessness, as well as a distorted sense of how to care appropriately for themselves. When a child's natural characteristics are not nurtured, the child develops dysfunctional coping behaviors that illustrate the 5 primary adult symptoms of codependence cited in Chapter 1. Abandoning and abusive behaviors develop because the caregivers did not give appropriate help to their children with regard to life's basic issues regarding self-nurture and healthy interpersonal relating skills. The first and fourth core symptoms are especially prevalent in love addicts: low self-esteem and inability to properly care for the self. The third core symptom, which relates to distorted thinking about reality, who the other party is also involved. The other 2 symptoms are also apparent, though they are less prominent. When the pain of codependence gets too intense, many of us turn to an addiction to medicate the pain because we do not know any other way to get relief. We find a substance, compulsive behavior, or person to soothe the pain caused by our inability to be in a healthy relationship with ourselves. If the substance, compulsive behavior, or person does a good job, we keep the process going, even though harmful consequences occur more and more often. Eventually, we become addicted to the substance, person, or compulsive behavior. The function of an addiction is to remove intolerable reality. It is often said that we are either addicts or codependents, but I believe that most of us are addict codependents, experiencing addiction to relieve the pain of our untreated codependence. When we enter relationships, some of us are likely to do so as love addicts, seeking to calm the pain arising from the root problem, untreated symptoms of codependence. We wind up with relationships that are painful, but that are almost impossible to leave because they do relieve some of the pain of emptiness. Compulsive behavior is therefore related to addiction, while the pain and stress that a person is trying to remove comes from codependence. I often find codependents using alcohol, food, drugs, religion, gambling, work, or relationships to try to remove such pain and stress. So not all codependents are love addicts. Love addicts turn to a person and to a compulsive behavior within a relationship as a drug of choice for removing the pain of the difficulties in the relationship with themselves, as defined by the core symptoms of codependence. Other codependents try to soothe the pain through other forms of addictive behavior, and so they are termed alcoholics, compulsive overeaters, anorexics, sex addicts, religious addicts, workaholics, and so on. Codependence precludes healthy self-love, and those who are compulsively driven to try and get someone else to tell them that they are lovable and loved are termed love addicts. The belief of love addicts that the other party can and will take care of them comes from the third and fourth adult symptoms of codependence: difficulty owning one's reality appropriately, and difficulty taking care of one's own needs and wants. On the other hand, the obsession about the other party, constantly thinking about the person, wanting to be with him or her, to make contact with emotionally, physically, every way possible, is a part of love addiction. Here endeth the chapter. Please subscribe to this channel to get notified about the next one coming up. And I encourage you to comment below your thoughts, feelings, anything that's come up during this chapter. I am Chela Walks, and I have been reading to you from P. Mellody's Facing Love Addiction. No infringement, copyright infringement intended. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for listening.